Hello, everybody. My name is Claudia Blue, and welcome to my presentation. So today I'm going to be presenting about who is Shirley Chisholm. So my presentation is going to be for a second grade class, and some of the big ideas I want them to connect her biography and her speeches to some of the current events or some of the people some of the figures we have currently. People like Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton. So with this project, students will practice inquiry, historical analysis, and making connections. So for the history, social science content standards for California, for second grade, it states for 2.1, 2.2, and 2.5 that students should be able to differentiate between things that happened in the past and things that happened yesterday. So that's going to be the connection portion of my project. And also compare and contrast their daily lives to those of their grandparents, parents, and guardians. So I want them to kind of connect their daily lives to their grandparents, perhaps like in the 70s, and make connections to Shirley Chisholm's life or how life was in the 1970s. And for 2.5, we're going to use her biography to understand the importance of individuals' actions and character to explain how heroes from long ago and recent past have made a difference in the lives of others. The others could be like, meaning us, people in the future. And for the Common Core Standards applications for ELA second grade, I use 1, 3, 7, and 9. Number one, ask and answer questions about who, what, where, when, and why, and demonstrate understanding of key ideas from the text. Also, describe characters in the stories, use informations and illustrations or words in print or digital text to demonstrate understanding of characters, compare and contrast two or more versions of the same story, different authors, different cultures. So maybe like compare different biographies that we look at and compare it to her speeches. So for this project, I'm gonna ask students to compare 1972 to 2020, and they're going to be using text to self, text to world, maybe use some of the knowledge they learned before, like Dr. Martin Luther King, JF Kennedy, um, and kind of compare the recent assassinations to Shirley Chisholm's bravery a few years later, 1972, and then talk about maybe how she paved the way for people like Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, and um, Hillary Clinton, and maybe even go way back to the 1920s and talk about E.W. Wells and how she compares to um, Shirley Chisholm, and maybe like some of the different um, struggles or different fights for like women's rights or women's liberation movement, things like that. So the intended line of historical inquiry. So I'm going to be asking three questions. So for the first one, I want students to infer and state their opinions. For number two, I want them to make connections with things they know or things they have learned. And number three, um, students should understand like the characteristics of an individual, what makes them heroic, and maybe like an opinionated question about like why, um, like about Shirley Chisholm's like character, why she's heroic, and things like that. So the first question, did Shirley Chisholm have any contributions to society, even though she didn't become president? This is a good question for students to analyze the text and look at some evidence and look at today's society and see like what contributions she made And number two, how did Chisholm pave the way for people like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Kamala Harris? So it's kind of piggybacking off of question one, but I want students to keep thinking about that question and, come up with some answers and perhaps use some literary what do you call it, evidence or something to support their answers. Was Chisholm inspiring because she was fearless or because she was fearful yet risked her life to take action for what she believed in? So, number three is more like an opinion, I would say. I want students to um, express if they felt like she was fearless or if she was inspiring because she was fearless or because she was fearful. So, I want students to start thinking about um, the time period and her character and the things that happened during 1972 and a few years before that, i.e., um, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, J.F. Kennedy, and the Civil Rights Movement. So this is the original text. It's a transcript from Shirley Chisholm's 1972 um, presidential announcement speech. And let me show you. So this document is pretty long for second grade. So it's about 3 pages. And, some of the words like, um, there's words like big name, where is it? Fat cats, and certain like words that kids might have like a hard time understanding. So I kind of I cut some some paragraphs out and I changed the vocabulary. I'll show you on the next slide some of the edits I did. This is also a good primary source. It's a poster from our campaign in 1972. And these are the modifications. I edited the version, changed the vocabulary, shortened it, and changed the font. Um, as you can see here, the other one was 3 pages. This is about a page and a half or so. And in italics, I put the words that I changed. Um, for example, for fat cats, I put rich political donor. And then I bolded some of the words that students might have a hard time with, like endorsement, minorities. These are big words for second graders, but it's important for them to understand these words when we're talking about politics. There's legislation, preservation, resources, conservation, and on the bottom, I offer some definitions. So I would either read this to the students or have them read with me so they could understand the speech. But I did condense it and I saved some of the most important parts. All right, so after reading the speech, I will show the students a video of Charlie Chisholm's biography after this ad. So this video is about 2 minutes long. I won't show the entire video. No, as the first African. But I will show you like some of the illustrations and kind of need a St. Hill. Take it. It's pretty easy to follow for students. It's nicely illustrated. It kind of explains her life in 2 minutes. I do have a longer documentary that explains everything. It's like an hour long, but I think that'll be more suitable for like fifth grade on up. And if we go back to the presentation, there is another video, and this one is a book. It's called She Was the First. And it's also a biography of her life, and it's nicely illustrated as well. And, it talks about her life and the things she did. And this is good for students to get some context for, her speech, which we read about. So it'll kind of give them like a connection to Charlie Chisholm by learning about her biography. And then after all that, I have this handout. So for this handout, this could either be, these questions could either be like a discussion, or I could have them write like a sentence or two of what they think. So for number one, they'll have to think critically. Did Shirley Chisholm make changes to the US? even though she did not become president. Number two, observe that Shirley Chisholm paved the way for people like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Kamala Harris. And number three is the opinion question. The question I asked earlier about Shirley Chisholm, was she inspiring because she was fearless or because she was fearful yet risked her life for what she believed? Here's a diagram I want them to complete as well. I want them to list a similarity between like Shirley Chisholm, 1972, and 2021 with Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, some of their differences. And for number three, like I want them to ask a question. If they were able to ask a question to each individual, like what would they ask? And then lastly, I want them to draw a picture of Charlie Chisholm's dream. So this is kind of a connection to Dr. Martin Luther King and his speech, I Have a Dream. So I want students to kind of get creative here. And, I want to see what they think or what they feel her dream was. So for some questions, at the end, I'm going to ask students, how did learning about Shirley Chisholm change your views of the 1970s? What questions would you have for Chisholm? And do you think that she would have been a good president today? Why or why not? So, some questions to think about. And so I think the most important historical question was the opinionated one about Shirley Chisholm, if she was inspiring because she was fearless or because she was fearful yet risked her life to take action for what she believed. I think this question will bring a lot of historical inquiry because they'll have to think about the past and think about like the recent assassinations and, you know, look at her as an individual. She was a Black woman in the 1970s, running for president, when JFK was just assassinated a few years prior, and so was Dr. Martin Luther King. So, this is a good question for students to think and kind of make those connections and think about the past. So, Shirley Chisholm, she was a great woman. I think it's important for students to learn about her, and I feel like she brings a lot of like connections to the past, as far back as the 1920s and to the present. Like we have a lot of people of color in politics now, and I feel like Shirley Chisholm really paved the way for them. And I think it's important for students to see like powerful African American people from the past, and learn about them. Um, yeah, so I think this will be a great project for second graders, and it could even be modified for like an older audience. And this is the sources that I used along with the links to the videos and a link to the transcript that I got online off of Common Lit. And thank you all for joining this presentation. Thank you. Bye-bye.